Long time ago. It is found in Matthew chapter 14, verses 22 through 33. I want to start by reading that, so out of respect for the Lord's Word, would you please stand? Matthew chapter 14, starting with verse 22. Immediately afterward, he, being Jesus, compelled the disciples to get into the boat and go ahead of him to the other side while he sent the crowds away. After he had sent the crowds away, he went up on the mountains by himself to pray. And when it was evening, he was there alone. But the boat was already a long distance from the land, battered by the waves, for the wind was contrary. And in the fourth watch of the night he came to them, walking on the sea. When the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified and said, "It is a ghost." And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Take courage, it is I. Do not be afraid." Verse 28 records for us, Peter responded and said to him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." And Jesus said, "Come." And Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water. And he came toward Jesus. But seeing the wind, he became frightened. And when he began to sink, he cried out, saying, "Lord, save me." Immediately Jesus reached out with his hand and took hold of him and said to him, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" When they got into the boat, the wind stopped, and those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, "You are truly God's Son." The grass withers, the flowers fade, but the word of the Lord stands forever. You may be seated. I have heard this story numerous times. Learned it in Sunday school. I've heard it used in sermons. And the majority of them have always had this theme. Peter was walking on water until he took his eyes off Jesus and he started to sink. We've probably all heard it preached that way, and there's nothing wrong with that. I agree with that. What I want to speak to you about this morning is the other 11 that were in the boat. The other 11 that were in the boat. Because here's the thing. Peter walked on water. The other 11 just sat there and watched. Now, I beg for your permission now to imagine this boat. Let's imagine it being a Baptist church. Peter gets out and walks on water. But now he doesn't just jump out. Notice what he does. He goes through a step. He sits here and he asked, "Lord, if it's you out there on the water, command me and I will be able to come out there with you." So notice what Peter did. He made sure, "Lord, if that's you out there on the water, if you tell me, if you command me, I can come out there too and be with you." So he checked, making sure that the Lord was there, the Lord was in this. When Jesus confirmed, "It's me," It's me. Now, our passage, it says, Jesus says, "It is I." But the literal translation, Jesus said, "I am." I am. Now, where have we heard that before? All the way back through the Old Testament when Moses asked, God, what is your name? And he said, I am. I am. So Peter confirmed this is Jesus out there, and he says, Jesus, if you tell me, I will be able to do this. And Jesus says, come on. He got out there. Now, yes, we all know the passage that follows, that he took his focus off of Jesus and he began to sink. But notice, it says, as he began to sink. He didn't wait till he was over his head. It says, as he began to sink, he cried out to Jesus. Jesus picked him up, lifted him up, rescued him. Now, I told you I wanted to kind of imagine that this boat, it's a Baptist church. Since it's a Baptist church, there was a bunch of committees in there. And I just sat here and I took the apostles just randomly and threw them into some committees. Okay? James and John. James and John. Here was the committee they belonged to. We've never done it that way before. That was the official name of the committee. We've never done it that way before. So it can't be done. If it could be done, it would have been done already by our ancestors. We can't do it. We can't do it. They're sitting here as Peter's climbing out of the boat, and they're sitting there like, we've never done that before. Can't be right. Can't be right. Andrew and Philip. They were this committee. What will people say? What will people say if we get out to walking on the water? What will they say? What will they say? Matthew and Thomas. What's this going to cost? What is this going to cost? Thaddeus, little James, they belong to the committee of, but I'm not a fisherman. Peter's a fisherman. It makes sense. He's out there on the water, but I'm not a fisherman, so I can't do it. Simon, Bartholomew, they belong to the I don't want to get wet committee. And then finally you had Judas. He was in a committee by himself. He was the committee of Peter, you're an idiot. Okay? So just real quick, let's review. James and John. We've never done that before. Ladies and gentlemen, in the church life, we should be seeing about ways that we can reach our people and reach our community. And if it's a different way, if it may not be the way Mama or Papa did it, that doesn't mean that it's wrong. I'm here to tell you, as long as it doesn't violate the Scripture, let's at least think about it. Remember a long time ago I heard a pastor say, hey, if it takes getting Evel Knievel to come to your church and jump the church bus to get some people there, try it. Try it. Andrew and Philip. Well, what will people say? Do you realize a lot of people in our church, they're more concerned about what the neighbors think of them than what God thinks of them? Matthew and Thomas. Well, what will this cost? How much is a soul worth? How much is a soul worth? We could sit here and spend a whole lot of money, a whole lot of effort, and maybe see one person come to Christ, and we sit there and say, well, was it worth it? Well, what is a human soul worth? According to the Scripture, the life of the Son of God on the cross. That's how much it's worth. That's how much it's worth. Dad and little James, I'm not a fisherman. This is the group that comes through with all the excuses, saying, well, I'm not talented, I'm not qualified, yada, yada, yada. Insert excuse here. Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't learn anything today, please hear this. I'll try to make it as simple as I can. God's not stupid. Never has been, never will be. If He calls us to do something, if He is leading us to do something, He will give us everything we need to do it. Why? Because God's not stupid. If He asks us, if He commands us, He will provide. If you're sitting around and say, well, I'm not gifted, I'm not qualified. Hello? The Scripture is full of people that were not qualified, that were not talented, all through there. He sat here and he took a shepherd boy and made one of the greatest kings out of him. He took Moses to lead the people, and Moses said, I stutter, I don't talk good. All through the Scripture, God used people that the world would dismiss. Simon and Bartholomew, like I said, I put them in the I don't want to get wet committee. Why? Because sometimes God asked us, hear me? Sometimes God would literally ask us to get out of our comfort zone. He would want us to go and talk to a neighbor about Him. He would want us to go and talk and ask somebody to come to church with us. He would want us to get out of our comfort zone. And then Judas. We've got some people, they're always going to find something to criticize. They're always going to be the people. Yeah, that ain't going to work. That ain't going to work. And they get no greater joy than if something the least bit goes wrong. Yep, see, told you. Wasn't going to work. I don't know about y'all, but I have literally met some people in my lifetime, faithful attenders of church. And I can't wait till we all get to heaven, because I know they're going to be outside the gate and they're going to find something to complain about. They will find something to complain about heaven. Just because that's their attitude, that's their personality. Here's the thing, Concord Baptist. I want you to be thinking about this. As you move into the future, what might God call you to do as a church? But let's get personal. Everybody sitting here, what might God be calling you to do as an individual? For the rest of the apostles' lives, the other 11 disciples, I have no doubt they would speak with awe about that night. I can imagine all 11 of them, if they struck up a conversation with somebody new, a total stranger maybe, they'd say, hey, there was this one time we were out in a boat, storm, middle of the night, saw something coming at us. We realized it's Jesus. He's walking on the water. Only Peter could start the story different. There was this time at night, in the middle of a storm, I walked on water. Because Jesus said I could. I walked on water. Ladies and gentlemen, we hear two voices all the time. One voice is coming from our enemy, Satan, and he's all the time telling us, stay in the boat, stay in the boat, stay where it's safe. The other voice is coming from Jesus saying, are you ready to get your feet wet? Are you ready to step out on a new challenge? Are you ready to put faith in Jesus and step out and do some things that you've never done before? You've never experienced before. What are you willing to do? I hope that as individuals, as